Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Perryman. I'm the clinical director and owner of Asset Group Consulting and Counseling Services, where we provide counseling services, psychotherapy to children, youth, adults in varied formats such as couples, individual, family therapy, as well as play therapy. Today we are promoting our psychoeducational series called Promoting Empathy and Resilience in the Family, a Culturally Informed Lens. And before we start, we'd like to acknowledge that we are located in Ajax, Ontario, which is in the region of Durham, Ontario, Canada. We are proud to assert that we are situated on the lands of the people of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nations, which is covered under the Williams Treaty. A little bit about us. As I said before, we currently provide adults, children, and youth counseling and psychotherapy services in group, couple sessions, family, and individual sessions. We have been servicing our community since 2013 and have grown to include a robust team of wellness therapists and practicum students. We would also like you to know that we're currently offering our virtual group counseling format, which is in addition to the counseling that we're already providing remotely. And so to learn more about our programs, as well as to access some of our articles that contain strategies and information about the services that we provide, and about just tips on living and information, head to our website at www.assetgroup.ca. And Asset Group is spelled ASETGROUPCA. So we'll start our webinar today. Feel free to listen to or watch the webinar at your pace. We do have information that we would like to share with you, and so it might be good to have a pen and paper on hand. We also have some great videos. They're about 2 minutes long, but it helps to kind of solidify some of the information that's shared within the webinar. And whenever things get difficult for you or you need to take a break, feel free to do so. Self-care is really important at this time with the webinar. And finally, I do have some reflections throughout the webinar. So when it comes to that point in time in the webinar, just take a pause and take some time to reflect upon the information and try to integrate it back to your everyday life. But those are some of the tips as you go through the webinar. So hopefully you enjoy, and we look forward to hearing back your feedback. Feel free to be able to do so on our website, or you can email us at info@assetgroup.ca. I thank you so much for joining us, and let's get started. So today's webinar, we're going to talk about some specific goals as we go through the slides and present the information to you. Each of our goals would include some strategies that you can use within your home and within your everyday life. You know, some work for you, some may not work for you. So just pick and choose, you know, what works best for you. And hopefully the resources that we provide will also be helpful. So one of our goals is that we want to talk about some of the common myths and parenting strategies that have developed over the generations through a cultural lens. And I'm sure that I've picked up some from my own childhood, but I'm sure that you've also had some in your own childhood. So it's a really good time for us to reflect upon what are those strategies that we've learned, and what are those myths that kind of continue to guide our parenting today. Our next one is that we'll discuss empathy and resilience in the context within the family and learn how to apply those skills within your own family. Empathy and resilience are such great terms in terms of how they can support families, but a lot of people don't know what that means or what it looks like to show empathy and resilience. And a lot of times, many families don't develop those critical skills. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about how you can be able to apply those skills within your family and encourage your family to show and demonstrate empathy and resilience within their everyday life. And we'll talk about some of the strategies that you can utilize to develop resilience, and then we'll talk about how we can promote healthy coping in COVID-19 currently with your family and with your children as well. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Our email again is info@assetgroup.ca. We look forward to your questions. This webinar is designed for parents and caregivers, designed for grandparents, foster parents, or anyone who has a family or who have children that they take care of or are part of in their life. I think the information here would be helpful towards you. And just a little bit about me. I currently hold a master's in social work and counseling psychology degree, and I've worked with families for over 20 years in a variety of settings, from counseling practice settings to violence against women shelters and safe places, as well as within child welfare. So wealth of social work knowledge and experience. And I do love my grassroots organizations. We started a grassroots organization 2 years ago called Infrarata, which offers a wealth of group programs and mentorship programs for youth and adults in a very cultural, sensitive, and appropriate manner. We also practice with an anti-oppressive and strength-based approach. So we really kind of look at the whole person and, the challenges that they may experience within their life and look at ways of helping them move towards greater wellness in a holistic fashion and in a fashion that's designed for them and directed by them, So it helps to create some equity within the counseling field, which is sometimes very scary for multiple different cultures and people who are not used to counseling. And so we try really hard to make it accessible as well so that people can access the services when they need to. So what we knew. This is my favorite slide. I took some time to just reflect upon some of the values that I learned growing up as a child, as well as some of the myths that developed over time in terms of how we raise children or how we raise our families and how we create peace and harmony within our everyday lives. And so I wrote some of them down, and I want you to take some time to write some of those common myths that you remember hearing growing up when you were younger. So as parents and through our own education, a lot of what we've learned and our wisdom really comes from our parents and our environment. And we could have been raised by our grandparents or foster parents or any other person who played a role in raising us. But a lot of those teachings really come from that early nurturing and caregiving that we received. Throughout history, for example, in my culture, our parenting has developed from measures that was based on prior historical issues and challenges. For Black and African families, the African slave trade had played a phenomenal role in terms of how parents raise their children. The parenting rituals of the switch or beatings and the insistence that children were quiet were part of our ancestors' ways of, protecting their children from being killed or teaching them how to cope within the experience of slavery and within that patriarchal rule that was occurring for 400 years. So thus, as we progressed in time, some of those parenting practices and strategies never really changed. And in our culture, parenting continues to remain based on survival, based on how that we can prepare our children to deal with some of the forces that were against them, to deal with racism, to deal with police brutality, to deal with violence within our communities, within schools, and even within our workplace. And because of that, it has led to, some common myths and misparenting that has occurred over the years. Our history, is there because it's supposed to help us to become greater. It's supposed to help us become stronger people as we learn to develop wisdom from the things that have happened in our past. And for all of our communities, identities, and cultures who have been shaped by intergenerational trauma, and we'll talk a little bit more about that term, Parents are in a unique position to learn from these past experiences and to develop parenting practices and strategies that create resilience within our children and also help our children to become emotionally connected individuals. So I talked about intergenerational trauma, and it's a new term. It's a term that kind of evolved, partway through my practice in social work, and learning about some of the challenges that stayed with families over generation to generation. For example, when I was working in child welfare, we may have had a family that was part of child welfare or had to have child welfare intervention when their children were quite young, and then they became grandparents, and then their children also became involved in child welfare. And we really started to look at what are some of those factors, those mitigating factors, community factors, social factors that are influencing and impacting families, that issues are not getting resolved over time. And so intergenerational trauma developed as a term, and it's a helpful way to help us understand how our communities and even racialized communities have survived through really horrific experiences of repression and violence, systematic racism, historical events such as the Holocaust and residential schools and slavery. Some of the atrocities that have occurred in history has appeared to impact families for generations. The experience of generational trauma can help us understand our own experiences that become passed down and our own states of being that we inherit from our grandparents and parents, and we pass on to our children. So I give you a definition for the term, and I got this definition from YouthRex, which is a youth-led program that provides information and even psychoeducation to agencies and organizations that service youth within Toronto, Ontario. And so one of the first term is intergenerational trauma. And it is defined as a trauma that's transferred from the first generation of survivors of the direct experience in the past to the second and the further generation. And if you think about trauma, it is an event or an experience that has had an emotional impact upon an individual, where they begin to re-experience that event. Even though they're safe and that event isn't happening, it can continue to re-experience that event within their day-to-day life. Trauma can be quite overwhelming, and it can lead people to feel overwhelmed with fear, a lack of control over their everyday life, over their emotions. It can lead people to feel unsafe, and when people feel unsafe, they also feel very vulnerable and helpless. Trauma can change the way that people view themselves, how they view the world, how they view their community and other people that they come in contact with. Trauma is very much an individual experience, but we're also learning that trauma can also be a community and family experience. And so here we are with the second definition of intergenerational trauma, which is historical and generational trauma. This experience of trauma is emotionally devastating experiences of people when a major event is aimed at a particular group because of their status as an oppressed group. So in this instance, we look at how trauma is transformed intergenerationally from the first generation of survivors to the second generation and further generation. Intergenerational trauma is very historical in terms of the devastating effects is not just experienced with the parent to the child, but you learn that these experiences have passed over time from great-grandparents to grandparents to parents and to their children. And some of the major events that have occurred that I'm familiar with in my own life is, the Holocaust survivors, the residential schools, and the experiences that Indigenous people have had in Canada, as well as African, Black, and Caribbean people and their own experiences, and other oppressed groups within societies. the experience of trauma can influence, our development. It influences the way that our brain develops. It influences our DNA and how we are shaped within utero, and thus it changes our future generations. We know this because we parent the same way that we're taught. We also parent in the same lens that our parents saw and perceived the world. Our parents have had their own difficult experiences of trauma, and that has helped shaped us as parents as well, or even our adult life in particular. So this is our moment of reflection. I wrote this in because I wanted to give you some time to kind of ingest some of the information that I shared about intergenerational trauma. And for some of you, it might be hitting quite home. Others, it might be a term that you've heard before and you're quite familiar with. And others, you're like, nah, it means nothing to me. I had a great childhood. Things were amazing. So if you can, and I encourage you to do so, take some time to reflect. If you're a parent or a foster parent, a caregiver, a step parent, a grandparent, reflect upon who raised you. Who was your main caregivers? How did they raise you? What did you enjoy about your childhood? What did you love? What was important for you? And then what was difficult in your upbringing? What are some moments that that you remember, that you hold on to? Describe how your caregiver disciplined you. What did they say? What did they do when you did something that you weren't supposed to do, or when they were trying to teach you a lesson? How did you feel about that parenting? And finally, I just want you to take some time to reflect on your own caregiver's life. Did you know about their everyday life? What did they share with you? What did they share with you about their upbringing and what they were used to and how they were parented? Think of what time of era were they raised? Was it in the 60s, the 50s? Was it in the 40s or the 20s? How might the experience, a historical experience within that time period, influence their parent and their parenting with you? I did this reflection as well to help you consider what you don't want to happen and don't want to do as a parent during this very difficult time through the pandemic. The pandemic is an experience for many of us where it can be quite traumatic. For some of us, it's like any other day. But for others, it can be quite traumatic because we may have had loved ones who was inflicted with COVID-19, or we may have lost our jobs, or we may be nurses or PSWs and are exposed to people who have had COVID, or in an environment where you're most likely to get COVID. It does bring up some past traumas that people have experienced within their life. And so if we take a moment and time to understand and to even reflect upon how that experience of trauma within this current state has been impacting your own parenting today. And it's not in a way of giving guilt or shame, but just helping us to just start to think about and write down and consider, what has changed about our own parenting given this current circumstances. This is probably a great time to take a break, get a drink of water, write your notes, and we'll move on to the next part. So here's the fun part. I had a good time trying to think of some of the information that I was given when I was young. So take some time for yourself to write down what are some common myths that you heard when you're growing up. And here's some ones that I produce. Children should be seen and not heard. Raise your hand if this applies to you. Spare the rod, spoil the child. Children are foolish, don't know anything. Children should obey their parents at all costs, regardless of what they say. And children are supposed to listen and not speak. And what are some of yours? I definitely feel that as a parent myself, and over the years working with children in child welfare and within play and child youth therapy, children are amazing creatures, human beings that have a wealth of knowledge to share and to give to us. They're very observant, they're very honest and pure. And, a lot of these myths, go against how you can give children their voice. Giving a child a voice is very important. And, whether they start off in a way that's harsh or they give attitude, it's always an opportunity for you to teach them how to use their voice in a powerful way, but in a way that people can really listen. And that will then help build their own confidence and allow them to be able to use their voice when they're in the playground and there's an issue that comes up, or in the classroom when they're there to advocate for themselves or even their friends. The point of our way of disciplining your children, when we think of spare the rod, spoil the child, the point of that is to discipline our children and to teach our children values and morals. So there has to be other ways to teach our children that doesn't hurt and that comes across the message. That's really important. So teach your child those values. Talk to them about, what are the values that you hold as a family? What are those morals? What are the things that are important to the family in order to keep them together, to keep them respectful and loving towards each other? And teach your children empathy, because empathy helps in a way of teaching our children how to listen to each other and allow us to also listen to our children. The values that we've developed over time within our society are based on helping people to show goodness and kindness towards other people. And that's where discipline comes from. So it's important for us as parents to spend as much time creating these opportunities to teach our children values and to engage our children into conversations and dialogues about how they can be the best version of themselves in different ways. Like I said before, children are very observant and they pay attention to, the behavior that they see from their parents, from their siblings, from their teachers, and they end up replicating some of the behaviors that they learn. So it's important as parents to be able to teach our children, the right way to live through our own actions. And so obeying and, respect comes by showing respect to your partner, showing respect to your parents, showing respect to your boss and other people that you come in contact with. Your children will replicate that within their own life. It is okay and absolutely important to teach our children about history, or about our history, and to let them know about the current events that are happening as ways to really empower them to grow, to think critically, and to be able to impart new knowledge from what's happening today. It's important to teach our children to respect us and to obey us, but also to respect other people, to respect their teachers, to respect other adults, to respect their friends as a way of being good human beings, not just because we need to follow the rules and we need to live this authoritarian lifestyle. It's important to teach our children, how to use their words in a way to advocate for themselves. And that's where teaching respect comes in, and teaching them how to then use those same words and same language with kindness and love and respect when someone has wronged them or hurt their feelings or made them feel, different or not the best way that they needed to feel. So I wholeheartedly believe that in imparting values and imparting discipline upon our children and helping them grow, that we can do so in much more productive ways. And so here are my new myths that I've come up with. Giving children a voice builds their confidence. Discipline does not need to hurt. Build your child's awareness of life and give them opportunities to succeed. Respect can be taught through love. So showing and reenacting love within everyday life with our children and with other people so that they can see that and live and replicate those behaviors. And listening to our child really supports their emotional health. So take the time to listen and to hear where your child is coming from, because it is very important to their well-being. This is definitely my favorite part. Building resiliency. Resiliency is so integral part of empathy as well. And empathy can be taught within the family. You know, empathy isn't a skill that you just get when you're born. It's a switch that goes on and it becomes an empathy skill just the way as a learning skill is developed or memory skills are developed. Empathy is a skill that has to be taught, that's learned. And as a family, as a parent, you can teach your children how to develop those skills within the family. So I want to start with a video. And this video was made by RSA Short Films and narrated by Brene Brown.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here. And you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with "at least." And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
I absolutely love that video. And I love it for so many different ways, because it helps us to understand, you know, what empathy truly is in a playful and, you know, giving examples that's really helpful. So 4 of the main things that Brene Brown shared was empathy has four parts to it. So perspective taking, staying out of judgment, recognizing empathy in others, emotion in others, and communicating empathy. These skills are important for us to also utilize within our own relationships, as well as with our children, to help teach them these skills. COVID is a perfect example of how we can teach our children empathy in this powerful way. And I'll go through each of these. So applying the skills, how can you develop or integrate these skills that was talked about within the video within your children? So whenever there are situations that come up or day-to-day life tasks that encourage our child to see another person's perspective. For example, we're sitting at the table and everyone has a different view. They're all sitting at different parts of the table, and we all have a different view. So take that time to ask your child, what does mommy's view is? Or what's grandpa's view? Or what is your brother view? What do they see? And that helps them to imagine, put themselves in that person's shoes and imagine what they may be looking at or what may they be able to see from their vantage point on that dinner table. A very simple activity that you can do in a way of teaching your child that skill. Another example is if two siblings are fighting or arguing with each other, ask them to imagine what their other sibling is thinking or feeling, and what would their other sibling do or say within that situation. A really great way of helping them to get themselves out of the situation and stop looking at, their point of view, but help them to understand what their sibling's point of view may be. So some of the other skills that I added as well was ask your child to describe how another person might feel, teach your child acceptance, explore biases, keep an open mind, always be open to take risks, learning to read emotions, so learning to see how people are feeling based on their facial and their body expressions, listening to others, and responding using empathetic language. One of the huge part is staying out of judgment. And within our culture, it's based a lot around, who can be excluded and who is included. So talk to your children about the people who are excluded. Encourage them to explore ways that they can include those, even within their own friend group who are excluded. Teach your child about acceptance. What does it mean to accept people regardless of how they look, how they appear, and encourage them to explore some of their own biases that may lead to them excluding people? And have open dialogue. I think the biggest takeaway that I'd love you to take away is that we can talk to our children because they are smart people and they have lots to share and give to the world based on their own perspectives. This one is a good one. Whenever there's situations that come up, even within our day-to-day life, we can encourage our child to see another person's point of view, but we can also encourage them to really explore, biases. So my family, for example, is of Christian faith, and we have lived for centuries, experiencing the intergenerational trauma that I talked about. They grew up in a very small community that was a bit close to poverty. So some people lived in poverty and some people did a little bit better within their community. But a lot of their practices and their beliefs were very based by fear, based by beliefs that if they did certain things, that bad things will happen to them. They often followed patriarchal rules. So the man would lead the household, and if he's not able to do so, then that household is not competent. And that really dictated, how they lived their everyday life. I grew up learning that we needed to judge people based on how they were living their life, or even if they're living their life according to faith. And in addition, I learned how to live with that same fear that if I did bad things, or I did things that I wasn't supposed to do, or if I was just exploring my environment, I would be punished. And this is a very oppressive way to live. That it often would take me, and it took many people that I've spoken to years to kind of unpack and process, even throughout our adult lives. But I first had to identify what some of those biases and fears are, which is hard to do, but it is helpful in terms of helping our children to move forward within their everyday life. So take some time to explore and even identify, what are some of your biases? What are some things that you hold on to that doesn't always, mean that people are included, and that means that there's some people that you may exclude or that you may not accept everyone for who they are. Except that some of our biases are ingrained. They're part of our growing up and how we are. and know that our children learn from that, our place of judgment, and demonstrate the same biases that we also do. We don't know because we don't have rules that govern us at birth. We don't get this rule book that says we need to live this way, we need to live that way. We're all trying to figure out how to live. And so let us try to do so by trying to accept those who are also doing the same thing and figuring out, what's the best way for them to live this thing that we call life. Many of us have, different worldviews and perception of themselves and perception of others that we talked about could be ingrained from intergenerational trauma or from how they were raised or from experiences that they had, whether it's traumatic or hasn't had a life of traumatic. So by learning to accept people for who they are within that moment, we can really open our minds to be able to then encourage our children to also do the same. Someone shared with me the other day that their father learned to change his perceptions. He grew up in a very British governed India. And so again, similar to my own culture, it was very based by fear-based and really strict rules in terms of who was included and who was not. And so he explained that he was able to learn to open his mind by, meeting new people and listening, really listening to their experiences in life. And this was like powerful for me as a social worker. I've been really privileged myself to be able to travel in different places across Canada or the US and across the world. And I think, having the opportunity to see how other people live in different places has also allowed me to have a more open mind in terms of, what values or what keeps people strong or what keeps people to be healthy and feel included within their everyday life. We can do that for our children. In this experience of COVID-19, we can take the time to expose our children to information that they can learn about different cultures, even learning about how other countries are dealing with COVID within their day-to-day life. We can encourage them to watch documentaries and read books about other people's experiences in the world, and create spaces for them to be able to share that information and talk about that information together as a family. So then I'd like to introduce you to this term called compassionate listening. Compassionate listening, and I'll explain in a video coming up, is a really powerful way for us to connect with other people by really taking the time to listen and to hear about their experiences and their own life journey that they'd like to share. It's very hard sometimes to listen, really hard, especially when we're under stress. And so accept that this period now might also bring us some stress as well. Listening creates so much opportunities for people to grow and to listen. We learn through listening. Our children also can learn through listening. Sometimes they're better listeners than they are communicators because they don't have the language developed to express themselves in the way that I may be able to express myself or other people may be able to express themselves. And so sometimes as parents, we don't always give our children the time to communicate the best way possible. But compassionate listening and true listening means that we're giving our children the opportunity to speak their mind at the pace that they can, whether it's stuttering or trying to find the words, that we're giving them the time to do so. Other times as parents, we can be quite quick to discipline or to rush in to scold our children when we hear screaming or shouting or no or other things that you hear from your children, without really taking the time to figure out what's really going on and to understand their perception within that moment and to learn to understand what they need and what they actually need from you when they're in a certain situation. By taking the time to expand our listening and take time to listen to our children, we do teach them about empathy and learning to have compassion for themselves as well as for other people. We help them to learn to listen to others in very powerful ways because we're taking the time to listen to them. And it's really important for us as parents that when our children speak and when they share information with us that may not be correct, or maybe their perception may be a bit off, or it might be a little blamey or judgy towards us as parents, we try really hard not to take that personal, because it really isn't an attack on us. It's really our children are still learning about how they can communicate, and sometimes they don't always communicate in the most kindest and full of love manner, and that's what we have to teach them. This compassionate listening and being empathetic towards other people, and developing that inner resiliencies are all part of something called emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is similar to intellectual intelligence in a way that it's skills around helping us learn how to regulate our emotions, very key into compassionate. So I have some strategies and suggestions for you to try. So take the time to listen before reacting. Reflect what you hear. Repeat what the person said. I hear you say that you're hungry right now, Tim. I will get you some food. Validate your child's feelings in the moment. Express humility and honor of being able to hold their emotions. I have a lot of honor and privilege that I also hold from hearing, people's stories and people's experiences, how painful that their experiences may be, or even how funny their experiences may be. That is my privilege. Do the same with your children. Honor the privilege to be able to hear their thoughts and to hear what's happening within their own world. So genuine love and desire for that person to feel better. Listening is so powerful because it helps that person feel better. Gets whatever's stuck off their chest. It helps them to feel almost that sigh of relief that somebody gets them. And you can do that as a parent. In that moment, place your own needs aside. Reduce your own stressors. So if you're feeling stressed, you're like, we got to get out of the house, we got a deadline to make, take a deep breath. We've learned in COVID-19 that within a day, a week, we had to shut down our lives completely. And really and truly, at the end of the day, it's really about that relationship and the connection with your child. That meeting can wait, that appointment can be delayed, all those things can be switched around. It's really important to be present in that moment with the person that you're speaking to that has a lot of heaviness on their chest. Hold off wanting to change or alter their perception. It is not the best time to discipline your child when they've explained to you that they're mad or hurt or shamed or guilty. You can do that later. You can do that later. And you can do it in a collaborative manner that doesn't seem punitive, but more as a teaching moment for them. So in that moment of compassionate listening, you're really just about listening. And hold on to some of the things that they share, because later when they're in a better space, when they feel that sense of relief from being able to dump some of their sorrows on to you, they will be able to listen and to hear suggestions. And typically in a counseling session, I usually wait to maybe the last 10 minutes to kind of give my perspective, but I always give them the time to just let some of that stuff go and let it out of their heart. And once they do, they're able to help move forward and listen to hear suggestions. So another powerful video that I found with Oprah on Super Soul Sunday was an interview she did with a Buddhist monk named Thich Nhat Hanh. He champions work on kindness and love towards other people, as well as compassion and compassionate listening. And he talks about this within the clip that I'm sharing with you today.
You refer to, I can't remember which book, but you talk about deep listening also.
Deep listening is the kind of listening that can help relieve the suffering of the other person. You can call it compassionate listening. You listen with only one purpose: help him or her to empty his heart. And if you remember that you are helping him or her to suffer less, and then even if he say things full of wrong perceptions, full of bitterness, you are still capable to continue to listen with compassion, because you know that listening like that with compassion, you give him or her a chance to suffer less. If you want to help him or her to correct his perception, and then you wait for another time, but for this, the time being, you just listen with compassion and help him or her to suffer less. And 1 hour like that can bring transformation and healing.
So I love this idea of deep listening, because oftentimes when someone comes to you and they want to really vent, they want to purge whatever is going on inside them, people start talking and giving advice. So if you allow the person just to let whatever those feelings are to come out, and then at another time come back to them with your advice or your comments, you would experience a deeper healing. That's what you're saying.
Yes, the fear, the anger, and the despair is born on the ground of wrong perception. And we have wrong perceptions concerning ourselves and the other person. And that is the foundation for conflict and war and violence.
You've said that the only way we can begin to end war is due to communication between people.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And we should be able to say like this: dear friends, dear people, I know that you suffer a lot. I have not understood enough of your difficulties and suffering. It's not our intention to make you suffer more. It is the opposite. So please tell us about your suffering, your difficulties. I'm eager to learn, to understand. It has to start like that, loving speech. And if we are honest, if we are true, they will open their heart and tell us. And then we practice compassionate, deep listening. And during the process of deep listening, we can learn so much about our own perception and their perceptions. Mm-hmm. And that is the best way, the only way to remove terrorism.
Terrorism, or even difficulties between yourself and
yes.
family members or friends.
Yes.
And the principle is the same no matter the conflict.
Yes.
Terrorists, anti-terrorists,
yes.
father and son,
right.
Yourself and your boss,
right.
Yourself and your children, your best friend.
Yes.
He brings up a really good point in the video called Loving Speech. And I wanted to read this quote that I received that he wrote or spoke a couple years ago. He says, when communication is cut off, we all suffer. When no one listens to us or understands us, we become like a bomb ready to explode. Compassionate listening brings about healing. Sometimes only 10 minutes of listening deeply can transform us and bring a smile back to our lips. Many of us have lost the capacity for listening and using loving speech in our families. It may be that no one is capable of listening to anyone else, so we feel very lonely, even within our own families. If we really love someone, we need to train ourselves to be a deep listener. We also need to train ourselves to use loving speech. We have lost our capacity to say things calmly. We get irritated too easily. Every time we open our mouths, our speech can become sour or bitter. And we've lost our capacity for seeking with kindness. Without this ability, we cannot succeed in restoring harmony, love, and happiness. So another key piece to this empathy, loving speech, and compassionate listening that I'm teaching you is to encourage you to give time to listen to your children. Become aware and pay attention to how they express their emotions through their behavior. Many times, as I explained, children don't have the language to express themselves, and they do so with their behaviors. It comes out in temper tantrums. It comes out in attitude. It comes out in slamming doors. Take the time to take a deep breath, step back, and really take the time to listen and understand where our children's behavior is coming from. Become aware of how they express their emotions through their behavior, and highlight to them and teach them how to be able to use language to express themselves, and allow them to know that they can come to you if they have a problem or an issue, and they don't have to resort to some of the behaviors that we know we all fall into, as Thich Nhat Hanh talked about within his loving speech. Use love and guidance, love. Something that, you know, when I got in trouble as a kid, they use licks out of love, but use love as in the loving speech and guidance to help address some of the behavior challenges that your children may express or demonstrate. Learn to use these words. How can I help you? What do you need? Identify when you're also not at your optimal best. So if you're tired, you had a long day with all the screen time, all your Zoom meetings, and you're just not in the best space, ask for help, take support, ask your kids for a 10-minute break. Learn to be able to use the help to allow yourself to recharge and re-energize yourself so that you can be able to enact some of these strategies in terms of supporting your children and supporting your family. Use kind words when you discipline. So don't hit below the belt. Don't compare them to, you know, their father or somebody that you may not like. It's not helpful. Use kind words and use words of empowerment and strength with your children, and also with your other family members who may hurt you through their actions. So give time to listen to your children, become aware and pay attention to how they express their emotions through their behaviors. Use love and guidance to help address poor behavior. Identify when you're not at your optimal best and seek support. It's okay to ask for help. Learn to take pride in humility. Learn to take pride in humility. And the final, as I stated, use kind words to discipline, to teach, to guide your children, your family members, and yourself. Resiliency building is a term that I heard when I was growing up, but I really didn't understand it until I started working in child welfare. And we were faced with many young people who've had really difficult experiences in their life, from as difficult experience as neglect, or, you know, their parents had mental health challenges, or there were drugs and alcohol within their home, to living in an environment where there was lots of crime, to, you know, fighting and domestic incidences within the home, to divorce, separation. I can go on with a list of challenges that our young people experience. We really tried hard to figure out what are the building blocks, what are those things that can help them succeed in the face of all these difficulties. And so that's what our next section is about, is resiliency building. So resiliency, very simple, is the ability to preserve and achieve a good outcome in the face of adversities. You're sitting here, you're watching me on a webinar. It means you have a computer, you have a cell phone. Cell phones are expensive these days, like $1,200, $1,500 for a cell phone. You have internet access. All of those things are a good outcome. It allows you to be able to be successful in so many different ways. So think about 20 years ago or 30 years ago, you know, what your upbringing was like. What were some of the difficulty things that you had to learn to overcome? And how did you get there? We can teach our children the same way in terms of building their resiliency. And so I often use this video too in a training platform, particularly to teach foster parents how they can be able to build resiliency within children who come into their homes. That can start right off the bat, whether they're in your home for 2 weeks or 2 years. It's really an opportunity for you to be able to build some of those building blocks to help them to be successful. So I'd like to show you this video on building resiliency.
resilience is not some magical quality. It's something that really can be built, even in difficult circumstances.
The key active core ingredient to building resilience are the relationships kids have to others who care about them.
Of course, families play a very important role, but nobody raises children in isolation. We have a huge amount of research to show the powerful impacts of teachers, coaches, other adults in the community with whom children have a chance to develop relationships, who play that critical supportive role of building resilience. As a result of responsive interaction, children build simple skills of coping and adapting. How to stop crying, how to regulate your behavior, being able to defer gratification.
You have an adaptive toolkit that allows you at moments of stress or challenge to bring out a number of potential skills that allow you to get through it.
As children get older, the sophistication of those skills increases. Being able to monitor situations, solve problems. The way we as a society can nurture the development of resilience is to help communities to pay more attention to building the capabilities of the adults who care for children and provide the supports they need to tip the scales toward more positive life outcomes.
And then when communities say, we want to be an active part of crafting the solution to really understand what's necessary to produce the resilience, that's when the ball gets rolling.
Resilience building, capacity building, is really in everyone's interest, and everyone reaps the benefits when we do that well.
This is definitely a time of year, a time of life, history, that we are definitely going to have to build resiliency within our day-to-day life. It took maybe 3 months for this disease to travel from Wuhan, China to across the world, and it has led to devastating impacts for families and for communities. As I stated before, some of us may not have had a direct impact besides going through the physical distancing, but many of us have. And so it's still important through very difficult times such like this that we focus on how do we build resiliency so that our children are not marked by this period as a very difficult period, but rather a period of growth, a period of connection, a period where they can rebuild themselves as a family, and almost like giving us a restart button. We don't know how long this period is going to last. Sometimes it's 4 weeks, sometimes it's end of June, and sometimes it is basically what the governments feel is going to be the best for us and for our families. And so while we ride out the storm, what are some interventions that we can utilize to be able to build resiliency within our families? So I picked up 6. I'm sure there is many that you can also pick out within your own family, as well as the video also highlighted some major parts of how you can build resiliency in young people. And I picked up talents and interests as one of them. You know, many times we don't have time to spend on developing our interests or even figuring out what our interests are. So this is an opportunity to do so, try new things, engage with our family members on a different level, and practice new skills that we never thought we knew, from knitting to sewing to dancing to music or other talents that may come up for us. So talents and interests are definitely something that helps to build resiliency and something that we can fall back on whenever we have a rough time in our life. Mentorships are huge. I highly endorse mentorships. Well, my parents were amazing people. They were great, but there were many times where, I didn't always want to hear my parents' guidance and support. And we are also immigrant families, so we don't have close family members who are close to us. And so my community really adopted into their families and into, you know, that support circle. And so I highly endorse mentorships, because my auntie was very inspirational in terms of helping me get to here I am today. And that's the same for your children. So create mentorship opportunities for your children, create connections amongst your friends, amongst your family members, with your children, to allow them to have that safe person, that some person who thinks they're amazing, and video chat them and keep in contact with them. And builds up your personal strengths. We all have things that we're good at. Some of us are great at playing video games. Yes, I know you have some kids that do that. Some of us are great at negotiation. Some of us are great at arguing a point. Use and build on each other's personal strengths. So for those who like to argue, let's do a family court session. Do make believe. Those things are quite fun. Create supportive environments within your household. So create a place of peace. If sometimes there's a lot of people that live in the home that's very busy, create a space in the home that is a quiet space. This is a space that you can go to, that, you know, you can get away from everything and just clear your mind. So create those spaces in your home. Create an environment where people in the family support each other regardless of what ideas or challenges that they may come up with or experience with in their day-to-day life. Education is so important. Within developing countries, they say that by educating a woman within the community, it creates a higher standard of living for that community. So education is very important. And while sometimes online school can be quite difficult and hard to manage, there's other opportunities that you can teach your children how to learn. And so engaging in those opportunities, helping them read books, you know, helping them watch documentaries that are very helpful as well. You know, giving them an opportunity to experience life in many different ways is very helpful. And the last one is nurture. I love my hugs. I love the connection that we get from touch. So create opportunities to build and nurture within your everyday life as a way of building resiliency within your children. So let's put this all together. You know, we started our talk talking about intergenerational trauma and giving light to highlight, you know, some of the difficulties and some of the myths that I've learned growing up from my parents. I've learned to recognize the impact of trauma within my family, with even my own perception and mindset, and learn to be really mindful of how that can impact my day-to-day interactions with others. And I'm hoping that this was helpful for you. It was very much an overview of that learning and understanding. So if you're interested in learning more about intergenerational trauma, please do the research around this topic, because it is quite important. And there is such a great way of highlighting, you know, our past and our future as we're moving forward. We talked a little bit about, you know, what is empathy? What is compassionate listening? What is loving speech? What is resiliency? Those are key terms that we can take within our families, and we can help build our children so that they can be stronger humans and be very successful, which is all that we want as caregivers and parents, is for our children to be successful. And during a very difficult time as COVID-19 that we're all experiencing, you know, we can use some of those skills to help our families kind of manage the trauma experiences that are going to come up from this, but also help us to create some balance within our homes. So we'll put it all together in terms of promoting healthy families. But first, we have an exercise. And so I'm sure that you all have learned stuff about yourself through COVID-19. I will also teach you some things that I learned about myself. Believe it or not, manis and petties are actually essential. I've had many bandages over the last couple of weeks because my fingers peeled apparently, and your nails don't always grow the way they're supposed to. So definitely feel that's an essential service. I've learned that my bedtime used to be 8 p.m. Sometimes I start getting to bed like 8, 10 o'clock, I'm in bed. Now my new bedtime is 2 a.m. I cannot sleep. And I've heard a lot from clients as well that they're really struggling with their sleep patterns. So I've learned to go with the flow, and I've learned to take my naps that I need to and sleep the amount of time that I need to. It's all right. We're going through a pandemic. Fresh air smells amazing. So once a day, I try to breathe in some fresh air. I open my windows. I try to let some of the outside air come inside, because it's absolutely amazing to be able to smell fresh air. Thank goodness. I'm a great COVID-29 cook. I have 19 look. I have definitely mastered omelets and Kraft dinner with extra cheese. Thank you very much. I can also cook other stuff. I'm just joking. I used to spend lots of times on the computer writing reports and essays. Unfortunately, I can't do that anymore. Being on the computer is very exhausting. It's very time consuming. And so I've learned that I'm not so much as a computer person as I used to be. And also not the tech savvy. The world has completely changed from when computers came out when I was in the late 90s. I am so over Netflix. I used to have the greatest time talking about all the Netflix shows that I used to watch on the weekends and used to sit for hours watching TV. I'm so over it. I have purchased probably every single subscription that you can. Crave, Amazon Prime, Hey You, everything. I'm so over all the TV. Unfortunately, my daughter still doesn't think I'm fun. I try, but she still looks at me and rolls her eyes most of the time. I still can't sing and dance, and I also really do like to watch people. So whenever I see people, a little part of me just jumps for joy. Yay, somebody to look at. What have you learned about yourself post-COVID? So as we move forward to the latter part, the last 10 minutes of our presentation, I wanted to highlight to you some of the skills that's really important for your family to adapt and develop. So feel free to take notes. I hope you've been taking notes throughout our webinar. And if you think of other ideas that I didn't even think of or I didn't even add, feel free to drop us a line as well at info@assetgroup.ca. So our first important thing that I hope that you've gotten from our webinar is that talk to your children. Talk to your children about what's happening with the pandemic. Talk to your children about the risk in a way that will be helpful towards them. So we don't always have to give them the updates and stats in terms of how many people have COVID, how many people have been tested. But we can talk to them about, what usually happens during a pandemic. What are some of the social and economic issues that may come up, and how our government has been really great in terms of putting resources back into the community as a way to keep our economy moving so that we don't enter into the Great Depression. Very political, theoretical ways of dealing with major incidents that happen within our community. And those are the great things. Those are great conversations to have with your children, age appropriate, of course. But also for younger children, there's lots of books that have been produced recently on, how to talk to your children about being inside and what that seems like, and with the reason why they're to be inside. Being inside helps them right now to help them to stay safe. And that's the message that is important that you give to your children. Listen and hear their concerns and their thoughts. So use your compassionate listening skills that we've talked about today, and use your loving speech in terms of conveying messages and languages to your children. Reframe conversations that they may hear on TV. Sometimes we hear some really not so important things or not so great things on the television. There's not always some good news stories. And so when those things happen, please take the time to reframe it to your children, because sometimes they can perceive information that they hear on television, they can perceive it as something negative, and they can impact their thinking, it can impact their worrying, and bring some fear with them. Some of the children that I've done play therapy with over the last little bit have talked about their own experiences that they've had, and really around just overhearing conversations that probably wasn't best that they overheard, and no one kind of like talk to them about it. So take the time to talk to your children and reframe some of the conversations that they hear. Reassure them that they're safe. Establish a routine. We've heard this a lot, routine, routine, routine. And a lot of parents have been amazing in trying to replicate the same routine they had in February. I'd like to take you off the hook and tell you that your 24 hours a day is your day to do as you please. So if in your family, the wake up time is 10 a.m. and school doesn't start till 1 o'clock, that's your schedule. And use your schedule of what works best for your family. Many families, many parents that I've talked to are still working, and they're expected to be at work from a certain time period. So it's hard for them to be at work and responding to their work's needs or even their supervisor's needs, and also teaching their children online school. So I've suggested to parents that start your online school for your children maybe later in the afternoon, maybe start it at 3 or 4 after your work. Keep it short, time limited, and convey to the teacher some of the challenges that you're experiencing with the online school. Not in a way to attack them or to be angry with them, but a way to help share that information with them so that they understand why your child doesn't hand in assignments every day. Carve out special family time, whether it's the family within your home or your family abroad. So House Party is a great new app that people can use to get people to join in. You can also use Zoom and other formats, a way of bringing your family together. So continue to carve out that special family time and continue to celebrate birthdays in any way that you can, virtually as well. Spend time using social media to connect with family members, Instagram, Facebook, or other social media platforms that you use to kind of connect and see what each other is doing and talk to each other and uplift each other. Yes, exercise is very important. I've established a gym in my basement. Establish healthy sleep cycles. So even though I go to bed at 2 a.m. in the morning, I still do my 6 hours of sleep, and I still take my nap in the afternoon. So continue to create healthy sleep cycles for yourself and eat well. You know, there's a tendency to eat lots of junk food, lots of chips, lots of cookies and other kind of sweets. But, you know, encourage yourself to also balance out your meals with healthy meals, with salads, with fruits, with vegetables. And that would also help to keep your immune system up as well. And continue practicing your self-care. For myself, it's the nails and the hair. These are the things that I grew up with, learning about, you know, how to take care of yourself. So invest some time every single week, even daily if you can, in terms of maintaining and practicing your self-care. Invest in the out-of-box supports. So I really had a good time in thinking of, you know, what does out-of-box supports look like? And so for myself and my culture, and for many people, you know, we never even thought of going to see a counselor or a psychotherapist about how we're feeling and how we're experiencing. Many of us were taught that if we had any issues or challenges, we kept it in the family and we didn't kind of share that with other people. We also grew up with the feeling that if you had feelings of depression or anxiety, it was considered that you were crazy and that, you know, you were not well and that you had to go to a certain place where people go who are not well. I'd like to relieve you of some of that pressure and let you know that seeking counseling and external supports is just a way of maintaining your wellness. So whether you may not be dealing with depression or anxiety, it's still important to have a third party to talk to about some of the challenges that you have. They might be able to give you some great advice and suggestions, or they may just even allow you to just debrief and kind of talk about your days and your struggles so that you can be better with your family. You can be a better version of yourself. So see counseling as not something you do to fix you, but more as something that helps to enhance and help you to be the best person that you are. A lot of our local businesses are, you know, they struggle through this time period because they depend on us for their income and for us to buy their products and services. So take this time to support your local companies and businesses. I found lots of information on Facebook groups and Facebook posts and ads that kind of helped me to find out and pinpoint who would be the best services that might help. For example, I needed some hair supplies. And apparently hair supplies are they're non-essential items, unfortunately. I don't get it, but whatever, they're non-essential items. So a local business owner who has hair supplies was able to take online orders, sent in my order, made my payment, and the next day they delivered it to my house. No fee, no charge. So that really helps that business stay afloat. So take the time to support local businesses and local companies. My parents, for example, they live in a different city and it's hard to kind of get out to see them. So we arranged a local food box from a farm nearby as a way to bring them fresh vegetables every other week. So that was another way that we were able to support a local business. Show kindness to neighbors in need. Another parent story. But my mom shared to me that she didn't really know her neighbors pretty well, and she started to get to know them recently after her neighbor dropped toilet paper off at her home. That is huge. Another person told me that she loves flowers and that she was able to purchase some flowers from a nearby flower shop, and she created some beautiful bouquets of flowers and dropped it off at certain people's home that she cared about. That's another great surprise that I would love to get from other people. So encourage your children to show kindness to others and neighbors in need. And these random acts of kindness also help us to feel good about ourselves. For those of you who've always been looking about developing a business plan or a life plan or setting goals for themselves, now is the time. If you've ever wanted to write that special book or talk about your life on a podcast, now is the time. So don't just watch TV or Netflix or Crave or any other subscription. Take the time to learn new things, start new ideas, and develop your interests and the interests within the family as well. Create opportunities for joy. So unfortunately, it's easy to get caught up into hearing about the news and the updates with COVID-19. I give myself 5 minutes a day. So every morning I take the time, I go through the news stats, I figure out where things are today, figure out if I'm supposed to be inside or if I'm allowed to leave the house and have some freedom. And then that's it. I shut it out. And I continue with my daily routine just as if nothing ever happened. Inside the house though, right? Physical distancing. So create opportunities within your family for joy beyond those COVID-19 updates, and create opportunities within the family that they can come together in very different ways. So in my house, we play office. I have a coworker who sleeps all day. And once in a while she gets up, she stretches, she goes to take a nap, she go get some food, and then she goes back to her nap. I have another coworker that apparently she told me that she works for 5 minutes and then takes a 10-minute nap afterwards. So we play office and then we trash talk each other the whole day. It's a fun way for us to connect and also laugh about our day and help us get through our day. Because most of the time, 4:30 comes around quite quickly in my house. Blast some music, play your favorite tunes, have dance-offs in your home. Do things that can build togetherness within the family and create opportunities for joy so that it's memorable. Take pictures, do TikTok videos, whatever your family needs to do to get through the next little bit. It's not supposed to be horrible for us. It's a way to keep us safe. And so if we use these opportunities to connect together as a family and bring joy, it will help us throughout the next few days. So I'm older, my eyes are starting to hurt. So I have my glasses on now. But the next one is create connection with spirituality. And I got this from this article that I posted, and I can post with the materials as well, that specifically develops some strategies that might be helpful for Black and African families. One of the things that I grew up doing every single Sunday at my parents' house or my auntie's house or other family members from the church was Sunday dinners. And I know that for a while I went to the Adventist church, and every Saturday, Sabbath, after Sabbath, they had a big feast and big meal. So let's continue to do that. Bring back our Sunday dinners. You can watch Sunday church programs or Sabbath church programs online. Many pastors have been streaming their content online. So use it as your opportunity to connect as a church body. One of the pastors had shared that his viewership had doubled, quadrupled since the experience of COVID. And you can continue to still give to your church through e-transfer and other means that they've also set up as well. So that can continue. So continue with your routine in terms of your Sunday dinners, your church programs online, write letters and set up chats with elderly family members. I taught my mom how to use Zoom, and so she Zooms us in every 2 days. We do a get together with each other. Use that as opportunities for your children to connect with other people as well, connect with their grandparents, or connect with aunties or other, mentors that they may have within their life. Give back and volunteer for others in need. And so that might be giving to food banks, donating to food banks. It may be to setting up a pen pal situation with elderly people who are in nursing homes or who are isolated, or other people who may be isolated as well. Check on your friends, because a lot of your friends may not have partners, or they may not have people within their homes. And so take the time to check on your friends to see if they're okay and help connecting with them. There's always this belief that, introverted people like to spend most of their time in their home, which is true, they probably do. Need that time to recharge, but they also need to draw energy sometimes from other people, and having periods of time where they're not having contact with people can be quite isolating. So take the time to check in, to send a text or a message of love and faith, of hope to people that you may be close to, or friends or acquaintances as well. You can also take the time to start an online book club. You remember those books that you've always wanted to read and haven't been able to read? I'm an avid book hoarder. I love a book, and I have many books. I could probably tell you that I've read maybe 5% of the hundreds of books that I have hoarded over the years. So now's my time. We're in week 6, but I haven't started reading. But in week 6, hopefully you can start picking up a new book and reading, or joining a book club to talk about the books that you read, or join a Bible study as well, or a cell group that's connected to your church if you belong to a faith-based practice. And finally, this is not going to be a perfect situation. There's going to be arguments. There's going to be, things that are said that is hurtful. There's going to be some difficult moments throughout the next couple of weeks or months that we're here. There may be stress that you may be experiencing within work, or with income or bills coming in. Like, there's so many possibilities that could happen. We have never done this in our lifetime. Our grandparents have been through some stuff. Our parents have been through some stuff, but I've never been through something so difficult within my life. And so I'm going to expect that there's going to be some ups and downs throughout that journey. And there's going to be some good times, and there's going to be some not so good times. And I want to encourage you that the ability to resolve and the ability to work through some of those difficulties can be really helpful in helping us to grow, in helping our relationships to grow with other people. So deal with our shame and our guilt that comes in. Understand that we all make mistakes. So we're going to say things that are not right. We're going to go back to old behaviors, and honestly, that is absolutely okay. Use these opportunities to resolve some challenges that we may have with each other. Use this as opportunities to reconnect and to spend time listening and hearing out what other people have to say. Use it as a teaching moment within your family as well when arguments or difficulties arise, and reinforce the importance of learning to forgive and let things go and to not hold on to the hurt. This is really a time that we can reflect and really celebrate family, really celebrate togetherness, something that we may not have been able to do for many months, many years, because of the busyness within our everyday life. And so that is our presentation. I hope you've enjoyed our talk today. I hope it was informative for you and that you were able to gather some really good tools and strategies to help your family through this very difficult time. I'm honored and privileged to have the opportunity to be able to share this webinar with you and to speak with you on a topic that is so dear to my heart. I have had lots of spare time in my 2 a.m. night times to write and to develop some other articles and strategies to kind of help us through this difficult time. So I've written articles on grief and loss, cultural interventions for different people of different ethnic groups and backgrounds, and for my own community as well. And other topics on, the experiences, anxiety and depression that we may be experiencing during this time. So take some time to visit our website and feel free to drop us a line if you have any questions. And thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to share our knowledge with you today. Again, our website is www.assetgroup.ca, ASETGROUP. And you can email us at info@assetgroup.ca. Thank you so much for your time. Stay healthy, stay safe, and be blessed.